It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Let's take a little bit of a look at some of the breakdown. We've talked about the meltdown. Now let's talk about the breakdown of the data. How did this election turn out? What are some of the key stats and bits of data that you need to know? Now you may notice, at least for those who are listening live, that it is a little bit after 8. Normally we don't go this long. Well, that's correct. And the reason that I wanted to go just a little bit beyond this evening is because there's a lot to talk about. And instead of trying to condense whatever it is that I was going to chat about tonight, due to some of the questions that came in and after some thoughts about the coverage last night, instead of trying to condense that down into, 4, 8 to 10 minute pieces, we thought we'd just kind of let it open up and air out so that there wasn't any confusion. Because when you look at the data from the 2024 election and some of the things surrounding it, you get to a very interesting case indeed. So let's first begin talking about the general demographics here in the country. First of all, Trump won Hispanic men. He won Latino men, the very first time in the history of the Republican Party that the presidential candidate has won Hispanic men. He did far better with all of the demographics listed. In fact, Trump even won suburban women in many states, which I was told that suburban women were actually going to be going for Harris. And they ran all of these ads and commercials that, oh, wow, it's just going to be these ladies that are going to get to the polling place with their husbands, and their husbands are going to vote for Trump, and then they're going to make eye contact, and oh, it's going to be just amazing, and they're going to vote for Harris, they're going to do this little nod, and they're going to make eye contact, like that one girl was saying a little bit earlier. Oh, it's going to be amazing. And then it turned out that actually, women in many states, especially women over 45, ended up voting for Trump nationally. Trump got 47% of the woman vote over 45 nationally. Trump got 43% of the woman vote nationally from women 18 to 44. That's not the kind of margin that Kamala Harris was at all expecting. For men, it's much, much, much worse for Kamala Harris. Trump got men 18 to 44 over 50%, 52 actually, and then 56% with men from 45 and over. Now, when you dig into state by state, and a lot of the swing states, what we're finding out in states like Pennsylvania and Georgia, as well as in Michigan, Trump actually pulled sizable margins in woman voters 18 all the way up, which is incredible because, again, the idea that you were told is that in the middle of the country, there were all of these women who were just terrified and they were going to vote against Trump and, oh, he's so stinky and terrible and awful. Oh, my goodness, it's just going to be just the worst. Nope, not actually what occurred. So looking at some of the data that's coming out from exit polling and kind of demographic work, I'm trying to pull a couple of different pieces here, both from left and right-leaning sources. Just again, in some of the data that we're looking at, Donald Trump did better in this electoral cycle, both from 2020 and 2016. When looking at, I want to make sure this is clear here. Trump did better in every single voting demographic except white women with a college degree. I'll repeat that. Trump increased his margins versus Kamala Harris with every single voting demographic except for white women with a college degree. Wow. That is genuinely incredible. It's genuinely incredible. And by the way, the number one reason why Trump did so is because he ran a larger tent campaign. He moderated a lot of Republican positions. By the way, at the ire of a lot of individuals in the RNC, he moderated the Republican position on abortion. He requested that the stance on traditional marriage be removed as a plank from the Republican Party platform. So Trump ran a more moderate position socially and economically Trump didn't even run kind of the complete free trade gamut. He actually ran as a kind of a hyper-protectionist in discussing using tariffs as a negotiation strategy. And he was very open about it. And those types of policy prescriptions, as well as just not being Kamala Harris and being awful, while also suggesting that the lady who was the border czar, openly called by many of the left-leaning media outlets, completely ruined the southern border yet again. Well, it appears, I know, just kind of a shocker, it turns out that wasn't popular with any of the demographics of Americans. There's this very weird idea among the left that they believe two things. Number one, according to quotes from individuals like Nancy Pelosi, that Hispanic people in the country are just here to like pick vegetables and mow their lawns, which is, kind of racist, but I digress. That these individuals also think that Hispanic people in this country and the various communities that make up the Hispanic demographic as a whole are really pro-illegal immigration. And it turns out that people who either immigrated here legally or whose parents, grandparents, great-grandparents immigrated here legally are really not fans of people who cut in line and also bring a lot of their country's problems with them. Turns out that's not something that Americans are all for. We're going to break down the data just a little bit more here. But there is one piece of news that I have to stick in here because the left ran this idea that Donald Trump was just going to have the easiest time until he got into these indictments. And they were going to indict him for all this stuff, and Jack Smith was going to prosecute him for all of these various things. And now it appears, and this has been confirmed not just with Fox News, but other sources as well, I think CNN also has confirmed this, that the Department of Justice has now officially confirmed that Jack Smith, the prosecutor assigned to go after Trump. By the way, unconstitutionally, the Department of Justice is not allowed to create offices fully staffed without the consent of Congress. But the Department of Justice's Jack Smith will be gone before Donald Trump is sworn in January. They also confirmed that Jack Smith's cases against Trump will be dropped. So now the president-elect of the United States, former President Donald Trump, no longer has to even deal with some of the annoying flies buzzing around him regarding some of these federal cases that were all smoke and mirror to begin with. And when you look at the electoral data in the entire country at this point, really shifting red except a very, very few small areas. And if you actually take a look at some of the bellwether maps of which areas voted more conservatively than last time, the middle of the country and the eastern coast of the country, by and large, voted far into the Republican side. Again, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, that entire blue wall, North Carolina, has been cracked in half. And Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, North Carolina have been called for Donald Trump at this point. Arizona, very likely to go. He's still pulling away, 66% reporting. Trump is going to continue to pull away in Arizona. That's going to be called soon. In Nevada, 87% have reported. Donald Trump has maintained at least a 5-point lead. It's currently 680,000 to Kamala Harris, 617,000, which means that we're looking at Trump with 312 electoral votes. Now, again, am I going to point out that my original prediction was for 312 electoral votes? Absolutely, because we can gain two things from this. First of all, those who were the electoral prediction analysts, those who take the polls and say, this is how the election is going to go, are the most goofball, dollar store meteorologist palm readers ever and should never be trusted again. But what we are seeing in this particular election is that the pollsters are starting to account for low propensity voters. The calculus is starting to move towards understanding that people in the country are becoming more skittish in how they answer polls and are starting to favor no longer kind of a hedging against Republicans and towards Democrats, which creates kind of a faster response time in the future for elections down the pike. Now, what does this mean actually going forward for the Republican Party? Kind of moving forward, what do we actually do with the breakdown of the data from this particular party? The biggest lesson that Republicans need to learn, and we'll talk about the biggest lessons that the Democrats need to learn that they're not learning. Republicans need to learn, well, really two lessons as well. First and foremost, Republicans need to understand you got to play by the rules that are on the table. If you have an election in which one party is playing by a set of rules, you need to play by that set of rules in order to win. If Democrats are going to be in this particular state doing a bunch of early voting, mail-in voting, ballot harvesting, you play by their rules, you get as many people, if not more, and beat them at their own game. That's how you win, by the way, is being better at your opponent at the game they are playing. Not the game you want to play, the game they want to play. You beat them at their game. That's number one. Number two, Donald Trump does not have the power to single-handedly coattail the entire Republican electorate. Republicans, unlike last night where Decision Desk suggested Republicans had only a 30-something chance, 36% chance, I believe, at 11:30 p.m., of keeping the House of Representatives. Now Republicans are almost guaranteed to have maybe a 2, 3 seat, maybe 4 seat majority in the House of Representatives, 53 or 54 seats likely in the Senate. Republicans could have had more. They should have had more. But you see states even in which Donald Trump won, like Wisconsin, Tammy Baldwin still beat out Eric Hovde, a far better candidate than Tammy Baldwin, who just is the worst. So why? Well, there are two key reasons. Number one, Donald Trump is an entity in and of himself. Now, Republicans have taken this before, meaning, well, we just have to present candidates that are a lot like Trump. Carrie Lake is not winning. Carrie Lake, the most Trump-like, imitators of the Senate candidates, is horrible. She has now tried to run for office twice. She has gotten beaten twice. She's bad at this. That doesn't mean just be more like Trump. What it means is that Republicans need to run separate but equally as powerful campaigns for the down-the-ballot races and for the presidential candidate. You can't just count on throwing all of the resources into the presidential election, which, by the way, disproportionately, Republicans threw a lot of resources into the presidential election campaign. Was it a good idea? Well, of course, it's great to throw a lot of campaigning into those particular races. But right now, the data doesn't show that that bleeds down to the rest of the party. And it is likely that that either cost or played a large role in the bill due for not receiving as many down-the-ballot victories as perhaps Republicans would have. For Democrats, there are two lessons they need to learn. They are absolutely not learning it at this point in time. Number one, candidate quality matters. You cannot just put any candidate in front of the country because they are a certain color and because they have a certain set of genitals and say they deserve to be president because they'd be the first woman president of color ever. Oh my God. That's not how that works, Dave. I'm sorry. That isn't a thing. You actually need to provide some kind of substantive, positive quality in your candidate for people to latch onto. And by the way, I want to point this out. In the criticisms of Democrats, where all the Democrats said, well, actually, it's not that Kamala Harris was a bad candidate. Actually, it's because America's really terrible. Underneath, people are asking, what was so great about Kamala Harris then? There is no answer at all. I mean, there's nothing people can't link to an article. Here are the 8 things that are great about Kamala Harris that have any kind of substantive quality. There's nothing. She has been an empty vessel her entire life. She's been horrible at this. She slept her way up through California government as Willie Brown's squeeze. Almost lost an election to a Republican for attorney general. And then, because California allows Democrats in this kind of weird pseudo-ranked positional race for Senate elections in California, Kamala Harris waltzed her way into the Senate, where she was extremely ineffective and embarrassed other members of the Democratic Party, and then was tacked on as a diversity hire to Biden's campaign. She had nothing, no positive qualities at all. They won't learn their lesson from that. They won't put forward a Josh Shapiro next time. They absolutely won't. They're not going to put forward someone moderate who has a wide base appeal, who doesn't shoot themselves in the foot. And that brings us to the second lesson Democrats need to learn. The hyper-progressive approach of saying men are bad, white people are bad. Now, huge swaths of the party saying that we need to talk about Hispanic voters, which is, I got to tell you, probably not the best decision ever to start making huge conversational moves over into we need to talk about how Hispanics are actually all really racist and ostracize another large portion of the country. and amplify people like Cardi B, suggesting that the electoral results are why, quote, this is why some of your states be getting hurricanes, end quote. I'm sorry, Democrats. Doing this ain't winning you anything. Not giving you any special super virtuous moves toward the voting electorate. By the way, the tweet that I'm talking about here, this has over 526,000 likes. That's a healthy portion over on X. Says, we need to have a very uncomfortable conversation about Latino voters in this country. Demonizing large swaths of people who have the audacity to disagree with you, and then putting forward Hillary Clinton 2.0. And I do want to point this out. I genuinely hope that the progressives who have made horrible decisions in this election put forward Hillary Clinton 3.0 in 2028. By all means, keep it up. Don't learn your lesson as your party begins to fracture more and more. You also lost a large Jewish portion of the vote, according to some of the swing state data. And that's not just from Scott Rasmussen. A lot of CBS and CNN polling shows that as well. That Kamala Harris awkwardly simping for Hamas and Iranian regime puppet organizations wasn't popular either. Big magical shock there. It turns out, that actually has an effect on the total populace. I mean, looking at Biden polling Hispanic voters by 33 points in totality in 2020. Harris won them by just 8 points in 2024. That is a stunning decline. Stunning decline. Trump polling Latino men by 10 points. Wild. And I mean, we could get into, all the ladies of The View showing up in mourning black dresses today, and they're so sad. And the weeping and the gnashing of teeth is going to continue. And still, you're going to have individuals like Shannon Watts say, Kamala Harris was not a flawed candidate. America's a flawed country. Okay, keep it up. But you cannot run the rules change style of voting elections in 2020. Where you basically have everyone voting from their slippers and throwing mail-in ballots galore, and expecting that's going to hold. Because it turns out that turnout numbers for the Democratic Party in 2012, 2016, and now 2024, largely the same. Doesn't look to be getting any bigger because the Democratic Party has no forward vision other than we will give you things, and you can act as hedonistic as you please. And as long as the country continues to put those particular things at the top of its priority list, I'm sorry, but survey says Republicans winning elections, and that's on the board. So with that said, I hate to tell you this, the walls are not indeed closing in for Donald Trump. The greatest political comeback of the recent political history of the United States, if not the world, has indeed reached its conclusion, and Kamala Harris turns out being a horrible candidate really didn't do anything for anybody. I tell you what, folks, at the end of the day, it really all comes down to making decent decisions in campaigns. And until we start to see that at the national level, large party organizations are not going to make any kind of impact. It's a lesson the Republicans learned after 2020 and 2022. The Democrats, well, we have yet to see if they're going to do so or tear each other apart in the process. Thanks for joining us for a bit of a longer episode of the Tony Kinnett Cast this evening. We'll be back, I believe, tomorrow with a little bit more on the state of things to come, a little bit of the transition goodness. Thanks very much. This has been the Tony Kinnett Cast on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated on radio and TV partners, first out of 93 WIBC. Take care.